So I'll wait a more second. Okay. I'm adding. Okay, super. Should be here in a moment. Hello. So, hello everybody. Thank you for joining me and Dr. Shawna Pandya, who will join us soon in the Space Chat Coffee. So, today we are trying to have a first episode of this new format that we want to try out. It's gonna be a very informal format where we are just gonna chat about space medicine and yes. So sorry for the technical issues. I'm trying to add. Give me a second. Sorry, she can't participate somehow. That's weird. Mm -mm -mm. Oh, that's so weird. Sorry, guys. I'm still a boomer from this perspective and trying to do something. Okay. Hopefully she's gonna be there. So I know she's here. So hi.
Hello. I think it
Hello.
is showing you my computer screen again. Let's try. There we go. There I am.
Hi. I'm so sorry. Somehow I was like, having struggle with. Yeah.
I think I
So
was
first of all,
struggling too. It's okay. We'll struggle towards success together.
that's great. So I'll start by saying hello. And hello, everybody who's joining us from home. And today we have here Dr. Shawna Pandya. And everybody who follows us knows already that she is one of the pioneers in space medicine, and you're based in Canada.
Yes.
So how are you doing today?
Uh, I'm great. I have just come off 2 weeks of travel to LA and then to Ottawa, Canada, and then to Florida. We were doing some EVA, IVA spacesuit testing in different gravity analogs, so we can talk more about that. And yeah, home for the first time in 2 weeks. So really, always really nice to be home for a bit.
Thanks a lot for joining us, mainly because I know that you have been super busy and the videos looked amazing. Do you feel like starting already by talking about how your experience was in the last week? Because I think
Yeah.
all of your followers wanted to just,
We can.
learn more about it.
Absolutely, yeah. So let me start at the beginning for those who are new to me. So I wear lots of different hats. I'm a Canadian physician, as you've heard. I do a lot of work in space medicine. I work with the International Institute for Astronautical Sciences. I direct their space medicine group. I instruct their space medicine course. And I'm also a scientist astronaut candidate with IIAS. And so what that means is we do a lot of astronautics testing and bioastronautics research in space-like environments. So they're analogous in some way to the space-flight environments. So we call them analog environments. And so what we do, the reason we do that is because space is hard, space is expensive, space is high risk, and space is trying to kill us. So it always makes sense to prepare as much as possible before we go to the space-flight environment. And also to get a sense of what technologies that haven't been tested in the space flight environment before, what they do once we get to space. And so that especially applies to spacesuits. And so when we talk about spacesuits, I'm going to throw a whole lot of acronyms out at you. Space is so full of acronyms. So EVA, IVA spacesuits, what that means, EVA is extravehicular activity or outside the spacecraft. Intravehicular activity is IVA or inside the spacecraft. And the difference between the two is an IVA spacesuit is kind of like your secondary spaceship within a spaceship. So if for whatever reason the life support system fails, you can't keep your atmosphere clean, there's smoke, there's contamination, you can simply put your visor on your head suit, pressurize, ventilate and keep yourself safe within your spacecraft. And the EVA, or outside the spacecraft spacesuit, is the IVA spacesuit with added layers of thermal and radiation protection to give you added protection when you're doing work outside the spacecraft. So if you see astronauts doing work outside the ISS, if they're repairing a module, for example, or if you see the Apollo astronauts doing their moonwalks, they were wearing EVA spacesuits. So what's really cool about being alive in this time in space exploration and human spaceflight is there are more opportunities for access to space, and there's more and more spacesuit designs out there. And so we worked with a company called Final Frontier Design. They have been acquired by Paragon Space. And so what we do with their spacesuits is we evaluate them in space-like environments. And so what that means, and so the reason we do that is because before anything can fly to space, it has to go through progressive levels of spaceflight qualification. We call those technology readiness levels, or TRLs. So there's yet another acronym for you. And before something can be considered space worthy, it has to go from 1 to 9. So TRL 1 is something maybe that you've scrawled on the back of a napkin in a bar, that's just a concept phase. By the time you get to TRL 6 or 7, it's something that you've tested in a laboratory and then a space-like environment. And then by the time you get to TRL 9, it's something that has space-like heritage. And so the way you get something ready for space in a stepwise fashion is you go through those TRLs, and that applies to spacesuits as well. So with all of that background, the way we come back to what I was doing over these past 2 weeks in Ottawa as well as Florida. So with Ottawa, we partner with the National Research Council, or NRC, to do parabolic flights or microgravity flights. And so for those who are not familiar with the concept, you are in an aircraft. You're not flying any higher than a commercial aircraft. I think we fly around 17 to 19,000 feet. And your aircraft is flying in a parabolic formation. And so the reason that that is considered a space-like environment is because just like when you come over the crest of a roller coaster, and you feel your stomach lift up into your chest for a second, it's because you're weightless. You're falling at the same rate as the roller coaster for a split second. So when you do that in an airplane and you come over the crest, you're falling at the same rate as the aircraft, and that gives you about 20 seconds of weightlessness, or 0 G. So now imagine doing that in a spacesuit, and with the visor down, the ventilation going, the pressurized spacesuit. So now you really get a sense of how hard you have to work against a pressurized spacesuit, how it behaves in 0 G, what your range of motion's like, how you tolerate the spacesuit, and then what else you might need to improve for future iterations. So that's incredibly fun. We were also doing our own science as well as testing some other payloads. So what was really cool is there's video of this. I'll post this at some point. We were doing solid body rotation experiments to see how different shaped objects, how their physics operates in microgravity, and then if you kind of what axis they rotate along. So there's actually a really cool video of me from last week with the visor down in the IVA spacesuit in 0 G with this little, it looks like a giant COVID molecule. That was one of the solid bodies we were testing. And so it was like one of the greatest days of my life because I'm weightless, I'm in a spacesuit, I'm just kind of playing catch with this colorful molecule. So that was one of the experiments. I ran my own physiology experiments as well. We ran some virtual reality studies as well. We can talk about that in a little bit. I work with a Canadian company called Luxonic. We do immersive technology for medicine on Earth and in space. We partnered with some really cool researchers out of the University of Toronto to do some biofilm experiments. I can't say too much about that other than that was really cool, but I can talk about the process because I think that's super duper important. But I'll kind of leave the Ottawa segment for a second. We can talk more about it if there's questions. As you can see, I love this stuff. I love working in the teams. I love the rehearsal. I love the operations. I love the briefing and the debriefing. And so hopping over to what we were doing in Florida, we step on into the world of EVA spacesuits. So one of our key university partners is the Florida Institute of Technology. That's where IIAS runs its ground schools. So that's the first thing you'll have to do as a student, and then you can do all our other operational courses. And we have something called a gravity offset system. So why do we have that? As you can tell, with the parabolic flight, you get to experience microgravity, but it's limited. You can experience maybe 20 seconds at a time. So maybe you need more periods of microgravity, longer periods than that. And so with gravity offset, if you can offload a certain percentage of your weight Then you can create an unlimited period of microgravity. If I were to say offload 99 to 100% of my weight, if I offload 83% of my weight, I can simulate being in lunar gravity. If I offload 62% of my weight, I can simulate being in Martian gravity. So again, we're trying to test, the ergonomics of being in the EVA spacesuit. I still haven't posted videos of that, so I'm going to do that sometime in the next day or so. And then the other thing is we were, again, running our own experiments. So we ran everything from physiology sensors to how it was to operate the controls of a rover, to going through geologic tool evaluation that we've developed in previous course iterations. And I again, was doing VR studies. And so there's some really cool images of me out there. I look like a cyborg in the EVA suit with a VR headset. Like, it's something out of a sci-fi film. And again, you're working in teams, you're keeping yourselves safe, you're keeping yourselves on the same page about mission objectives when it comes to science. You have, your suit handlers who are keeping an eye on you, keeping you safe, making sure your temperature's okay. You have your mission control who is operating the harness and the horizontal and vertical translation. And then you also have your test director who's kind of keeping the bird's eye view and keeping everyone healthy. So again, it's a whole lot of fun. It's a whole lot of team coordination, and it's really valuable when it comes to cultivating that operational experience.
Yeah, it seemed also really fun to always see the video that you've been posting, right? So I was like, wow, she seems to be having tons of fun. And you could also
definitely fun.
Yeah, you could also see a bit of you were also mentioning on social media about payloads and sort of also mentioning about the other experiments you have been doing aboard. That sounds really fantastic. So just to take a step back for probably the followers who doesn't really know you, followers who don't really know you, sorry, English being second language. So how did your passion for space medicine started? So for those who are interested, there is a really amazing podcast out there from Aerospace Medicine Podcast where you have been talking about how supportive your university have been and sort of it. But if you want to, talk about it a bit and just for others to understand how it started, that would be also cool.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, we dived right into it. So for those who don't know me, how I got into space medicine. So it started with, like a lot of kids, I think, is that I wanted to be an astronaut when I grew up. I was lucky. I'm Canadian. I've grown up in Canada. I was lucky enough to be a kid during the 90s when Roberta Bondar, Canada's first female astronaut, went to space. And the outreach around that was so great. The Canada Post Office put out these really cool collectibles, and they included everything from holograms to pop out pamphlets about what the gravity is like on Jupiter. And then there would be these features on the Canadian astronauts. And I was obsessed with Chris Hadfield, Steve McLean, Roberta Bondar, and what was particularly what stuck out to me about Dr. Bondar is, the representation. I thought, well, she's female, I'm female, she's Canadian, I'm Canadian. So to be like her, I just need to do what she does. I need to go be a neuroscientist, physician, and then an astronaut. And that's literally what propelled me to go study neuroscience and pursue medicine. And then somewhere along the way, I remembered that I was doing this for the love of space. And so I applied to the International Space University Master's Program. And that was really the first time I realized that this dream I had of loving space and also wanting to pursue medicine could be melded into pursuing research and internships in space medicine. And so as part of that master's, I was lucky enough to intern at the Crew Medical Support Office of the European Astronaut Center in Cologne, Germany. And then I was also from there, I started cultivating my space resume. I went back to, by that time, it was time to start medical school, and the space bug had bitten me. So everything that I pursued at that point was related to pursuing space medicine. So my first research project after in first year med school, it was this really cool project called NeuroArm. And so for those who are Canadian, you've heard of the Canadarm. It's that robotic arm in space that helps us do meaningful work outside the space station. So this was built by the same company, MDA, but it was a neurosurgical robot based on those same technologies that could do brain surgery. So it's like space robotics, neuroscience, surgery, all these things I'm passionate about. And so I got to help with the first clinical testing of that space robot that was now doing brain surgery. And so that was kind of the path. And then I said, okay, well, I want to do more. So I would go to conferences. I would go to the International Astronautical Congress. And, you know, I was a medical student. I was passionate. But I wasn't sure that anyone would want to read what I had written. I just did it because I loved it. So one of the first papers I wrote was on using telehealth and telemedicine technologies for global health. And someone actually read that paper and said, can you turn this into a book chapter? And then I was asked to write a book chapter on space technologies that have benefited terrestrial medicine as a medical student. And so the reason I'm telling that story is, you know, I know there's a lot of people out there who are interested in getting their feet wet, getting into space medicine. And the first piece of advice I have is just get out there, pursue, you know, find these conferences where people are interested in space medicine. Start publishing posters and abstracts, because you never know what opportunities that'll lead to.
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. And something I really loved about when you were talking about it during the podcast is that, like, you know, it was striking how also supportive people around you were, right? Because that also changes the entire game when you go further, and especially when your university there telling you, hey, like, you know, go get it kind of attitude. That's really, yeah, that's really fantastic. So you wanted to talk about in deep more about, for example, possum, or, you know, if you feel like it, you know, also for others who are listening more and who are not super familiar with the Canadian aspect of it, it would be nice if you feel like, you know, talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another thing where we could back up and talk about, you know, how do we get into this stream? Because that's the number one question I get on these videos, you know, where the stuff you see us doing is the more advanced stuff, but it all starts with a first step. And so the number one question I get is, how do I get into this? And so that's I'm glad you asked. That's a really simple question. So we can even put it in the chat. The website is astronauticsinstitute.org. And basically, the International Institute for Astronautics, IIAS, is our whole mandate is to further bioastronautics research through inclusivity, through internationalism, through interdisciplinarity. And so what that means is the cool stuff you see us doing with IVA, EVA spacesuit testing, with underwater neutral buoyancy lab testing, the way you get into that is you apply to the ground school. That's called AST 101, Astronautics 101, and you can apply to that to the website. And the official requirements are having a background in STEM, and then having a passion for space, saying why and what appeals to you about the program. Scuba diving, piloting licenses are nice to have, they're not need to have. And then, you know, for those of you saying, well, I'm a lawyer, but I'm still interested in space. I'm an artist. I'm a storyteller. There's still room for you. You can still apply. That just the only difference is you go to our academy rather than our ground school stream. The only difference is we break down the STEM, the more technical components, so they're more accessible. That's really the critical difference. So once you complete that ground school, so that's several weeks of virtual instruction plus a 4 or 5 day ground school where you're going through suborbital mission simulation, you're learning about upper mesospheric noctilucent cloud research, you're working in teams, you're undergoing aerobatic flight profiles to just experience changing G loads. Once you graduate from that, then all of the other courses that are operational, all of the ones I've mentioned about zero G flights, about gravity offset testing, my space medicine course, they're all accessible. And actually my space medicine course is the exception in that it doesn't require any prerequisite. It doesn't require the ground school. So, you know, if you want to learn about space medicine and then come do drills in the wilderness, you can certainly do that. Yeah, and so it's been an amazing ride. I've been involved with IIAS since 2015. I was the second class to go through. At the time, I was the only female in my class. And now, you know, we have so much, we've done such a great job of increasing the inclusivity. The number of countries we have at this point is something like 40 to 50 have been involved. We have, you know, everyone from doctors, engineers, pilots, astronauts, you know, some of the commercial astronauts, Sarah Sabri, Katya Eschereza, Sian Proctor, have been through our program. We have people who have been former Secret Service with the U.S. Government. So we take all comers, and it's are you a good teammate? Are you passionate about furthering bioastronautics research? Come to our institution. So, you know, definitely we can always take more questions on that. But the bottom line is it's been an incredible ride.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds also like, I think also for the audience who are following us and who will follow us later, what will remain is the passion that you're transmitting, right? Because like, in the end, when you're enthusiastic about something, it's really also amazing to hear you talk. So, I don't know how you're with times. I would have like, another question about, like, one of the latest conversations you have, latest conferences and good talks you had was about sexual reproduction in space, and also about you work a lot with telemedicine and AI things, which is also interesting right now with ChatGPT 4 coming out. It has been like a boom of AI. Also, the papers, when you go to PubMed or IEE, it's full of AI papers. So, like, what are your take-home messages on these two topics? I understand it's like a huge question, but feel free to answer as in deep or as not in deep as you feel like. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Yeah. There's we haven't even talked about the space medicine stuff yet on the space medicine podcast. Yeah, so quickly, I know we're short on time, but maybe this can be the fodder for a round two. On the space medicine side, my day-to-day work includes research in sexuality and reproduction in space. And the reason I got into that was one of the former chief medical operation personnel at Johnson Space Center, Dr. Jim Logan, was very much passionate and an evangelist about, talking about the importance of doing research on reproduction and sexuality in space, which makes sense if you're talking about extended space flight, multi-planetary, being a multi-planetary species. Well, that implies reproduction. So there's a lot we need to know about what humans do in space. And it starts with animal studies, animal models. It starts with the research that's been done on zebrafish, jellyfish, cockroaches, wasps. All of that research has been done, but we need more data. He was kind enough to take myself and someone who would eventually become my co-author on sexuality and reproduction in space. And I think he's actually joined the chat. I saw him pop in, Alex Blaindecker. Hey, Alex. We both got to start presenting on this, and then Alex and I eventually co-authored a book chapter on space medicine, sexuality and reproduction in long-duration spaceflight. And what's really cool is Alex is one of the world's first astrosexologist experts. So literally his PhD is in astrosexology. We've published on this. We've talked about this. The community is starting to grow. We had a great panel on this at South by Southwest. And really, with the rise of commercial spaceflight, it's becoming more and more important because, space agency missions are one thing. You're very regimented on your mission objectives, your science, but when people are starting to go to space for leisure, you might infer that sexuality and reproduction might be involved with that. So that's one of the aspects of what I work on. I mentioned I work on work with Luxonic Technologies, which is a Canadian startup. We focus on immersive technologies, virtual reality, augmented reality for long duration, for space flight, exploration class missions, as well as on Earth. So we have created the world's first digital twin of the radiology reading room in virtual reality. So all of that setup you see that radiologists have, high resolution monitors, image manipulation tools, we've recreated that in VR. We have Health Canada approval for that. We are pursuing FDA approval for that. We have partners in North America, South America, Africa. And then we've also created virtual reality medical training modules for astronauts on long-duration spaceflight, as well as here on Earth. So we saw a great need for this during the pandemic when folks couldn't train in their traditional ways in educational labs, simulation labs. So we've created airway modules for paramedics. We've created sepsis modules for the Canadian Space Agency. So that's a lot, but I'll kind of leave it there. I know we're short on time, but maybe if we could see a show of hands in the chat of who would want a part two, and if there's any questions that we can take for the next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Also because like today we did it like I didn't prepare any questions as we decided to do it super casual and have a chat about it. So if you want to absolutely have round two, write it in the comments. And thanks a lot for your time. I appreciate it, and definitely all of our public appreciated it. And we want to hear more from you, honestly. So see, people are already saying that they want a round two, so that's great. So thanks again for coming back after, like, 2 weeks of intensive silence.
Yes, yeah.
um,
There is one question in the chat that I see that I can answer. I see Astro J Forte, hi, is asking where the birdie is. She she was misbehaving this morning, so she is back in her cage. She gets a little bit overexcited if I've been away for too long, and then she gets very, very overexcited. So she was out for a bit, and now she's been banished to her cage. But maybe we'll bring her out for the next round.
Absolutely, we have to. That's
Perfect.
great. So I wish you an amazing evening. So it's 6 hours back, right? So
Yes.
it's, oh my God, math is so tough. Uh,
10:30 here in Edmonton, Alberta. I think it's 6:30 for you. But
yes,
I feel like we've just scratched the surface. This was so much fun. Thank you for creating this venue for talking about space medicine. I know there are so many space medicine folks waiting in the wings that you can showcase on this platform. So let's do a round two, and thank you
absolutely.
for having me on.
Thank you. So have a great evening. Bye.